I was part of a special pilot project in California. I was a judge for most of my career, and we kept seeing the same organizations come through our system with a lot of litigation and a lot of conflict. And we were trying to see what's the difference between those organizations that had so much conflict, which was costing the state of California a huge amount of money, primarily in lost productivity, compared to other organizations that seemed to be more collaborative, more effective at resolving their conflicts, and we never saw them in litigation. You know, they didn't have to come into court. So we're trying to see what we could do to help these organizations that had so much conflict. We got a big grant from the Hewlett Foundation. I was asked to participate in this because I'd done so much mediation. I've mediated a lot of strikes and labor disputes. And so we got this grant. We did a lot of research. We put together a pilot program to try to teach the more adversarial, conflicted groups how to be more effective at collaboration, and we were just wildly successful. Trust went up. We reduced the amount of measurable conflict by 70% in almost 100 different organizations. Saved the state of California so much money, they created a nonprofit foundation for actually making it available in other public sector organizations in California. So it was through that project that I got involved in actually writing about collaboration and studying it. But I'd been using it a lot in my mediation. I've mediated over 1,000 labor disputes. And so I was always aware of, the impact of collaboration. But I hadn't studied it until we had this project. And then once that happened, I ended up writing the Radical Collaboration book after that project. And then it got translated into a bunch of languages, and my world exploded from California to the world. So that's what got me. When we first started looking at organizations and the impact that culture played on an organization, we saw a range of attitudes and behavior. At one end of the spectrum was what we called the red zone, which was a more hostile, conflicted, adversarial type of culture that didn't feel very safe for people. It was a very aggressive people didn't feel safe there. They felt like they were being bullied. So oftentimes they just went underground. The other end of the spectrum we call the green zone, which is a more collaborative, more effective, more supportive, cooperative type of culture, where people are more supportive towards each other. And those were the two extremes. Now, we rarely see an organization that is pure red zone or pure green zone. It's often pockets of this and pockets of that. And there are, in the most collaborative green zone culture, there are people that get defensive and have fights and all that kind of stuff. And in the most hostile, adversarial, conflicted and red zone environment, there are people that work well together and get along, But those were sort of the extremes of the cultures that we saw. And the green zones organizations, there's been a lot of research showing just over time will pretty consistently outperform the red zone organizations by a massive amount. A green zone collaborative culture can kick the butt of a red zone conflicted culture, almost always over time. Now there are exceptions to that, of course, but they tend to be the exceptions. But then about 7 to 10 years ago, we started hearing a lot of people say, well, we're obviously in the green zone because we don't fight. And they assumed that if they weren't engaged in open warfare, they were being collaborative. But really what it was is they were just being more passive, conflict avoidant, a version of the red zone, which now we call the pink zone. It's a very passive, conflict avoidant. People are fearful, so they just keep their mouths shut. And that's what tipped us off, because people were saying, well, we're obviously in the green zone because we don't fight. If there's a problem, I just keep my mouth shut. I keep my eyes down and my mouth shut. And that's not effective collaboration. It's just a nicer looking version of the hostile red zone, because everybody is nicey with each other, but they still don't get things done. So those are the three cultures that we see now. And the pink zone culture is the one that seems to be predominant, certainly predominant in all of our clients. And the research would suggest that it's probably the most predominant culture in organizations all over the world. The next steps for me, personally, are to continue to try to spread this around the world. I mean, I didn't dream that we would have so many people around the world teaching this and interested in this when we first started it. It was like long before collaboration was popular. And we got invited to come over to Europe and do a workshop there. And people were very interested, you know, and then it sort of took off there, and now it's taking off in Mexico. Mexico is the fastest growing market that we have right now. And so for me, my next steps are to do what I can do to support the growth of that, because I see all of these people going out teaching these new collaboration skills, and I can see the impact that it has on an organization. You know, it can spread through an organization and transform an organization in a fairly short period of time. So we want to get I've just written the second edition of Radical Collaboration, the book. We want to get that translated into Spanish. I've got to update the Leader's Guide and the workbook itself from the workshops. I give a lot of speeches. I teach in some high-end leadership programs to try and keep it alive within the organizations. So it's just a question of what I can do to foster growth of the concepts throughout the community. And that's my next step. Beyond that, I probably have fewer goals than I've ever had in my life. I've been very goal-oriented in my life, and right now I've sort of let go of most of them and just put in support. So I mentioned spreading this, that it's growing in Mexico, for example. What spreads it is if we get more and more trainers, more and more people within organizations that are interested in having an impact on their organization. So we're doing trainer certification programs as well. And for example, in Sweden, a population of 9 million people, we have 230 certified trainers. In Mexico, we probably have 14 or 15 right at the moment, and that's probably going to double within the next year, and then double the year after that. So that's how it's going to grow. And in the trainer certification program, we call it an RCTC. What we do is we teach people how to teach the collaboration skills, how to teach the Radical Collaboration Workshop. And so that's the biggest growth tool that we have right now, getting more people trained to teach and having, you know, it's like throwing a pebble in the water. You know, the rings go out and they keep on going out and farther and farther.